All right, welcome to the In2 InThinking Network's November 2025 webinar series. I'm Bill Bellows, your host, and our featured guest presenter this month, right, John Lenhart from sunny Florida. One thing I say is that John and I went to rival college hockey universities in upstate New York. Where he went was really upstate New York. Where I went was 3 hours or so south of there. John graduated from Clarkson University as a chemical engineer. I went to Rensselaer. Again, we were arch rivals. John and I are over that. What really impressed me with John, amongst things you'll hear today, is that John did the color for the hockey games, and he knows the names of the stars on RPI's 1985 national championship team. And I thought, how do you know all these names? I thought, wow. So amongst other things, that really impressed me. So anyway, I'm going to turn it over to John. And this is a presentation that John gave at the In2 Forum in June that we wanted to redo. And there we are. So John, it's over to you.
Thank you, Bill. Yeah, so Bill and I have been meeting together for 2 years. We meet twice a month. And one of the things Bill helped me realize is my career success has been because I've been using the system of profound knowledge. Didn't realize I was, but I've been using like a 3D version of it. And Bill had me read Out of the Crisis and the New Economics. And it's interesting because there's a certain pattern to trilogies. So the first book in a trilogy, there's a problem or a crisis, and it's solved, and everybody celebrates. The Death Star is blown up. But then the second book in the trilogy or the second movie is like, oh, you thought that was the problem? There's a bigger problem that's going to have a lot more Death Stars to it. Oh, no. And the second book or movie ends like, are we ever going to fix this? Well, when you read Out of the Crisis, the 14 points kind of handle the situation. But right away in the New Economics, he says, look, those 14 points are effects of the system of profound knowledge. This is like the thing. So I wrote up a summary for Out of the Crisis and I fed it into AI and said, could you rewrite this as the summary of a first book in a trilogy? And it gave me the response back. Then I wrote a summary for New Economics. I fed it into AI and said, could you write this as the second book in a trilogy if the first book was, and I gave it the summary to the first book. So it wrote it. Then I said, could you write me a summary of the third book? How is this trilogy supposed to end? And it's interesting because there's three things, and I'm going to cover that in this talk, one of them in depth, but there were three things that Deming would have to do to finish this trilogy. And the thing is when you finish the trilogy, it makes the first two installments more meaningful. We now know who Luke's father is in the third part. Now we rewatch the first two and we go, oh, this makes even more sense. So the thing is one of the things that it said is Deming would have to make the system of profound knowledge explicit. He'd have to explain exactly how to use this intentionally. Deming would like to say, by what method? When you say you're doing something, he'd say, by what method? What he was really saying is, are you talking about that implicitly or explicitly? If you can tell me the method, you're being explicit. If you just go, we're going to help people, by what method? Help people. That's implicit. So that's the goal of this. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to show you basically what part of the third book would look like and illustrate how it would make the second book quotes from Deming become more alive. So that's what I'm going to do. So the thing is, let's see I was afraid of this. There we go. Okay. So Deming, right from the start of the New Economics, the route to transformation is what I call profound knowledge. The system of profound knowledge. I know people go, Deming never said it was the system of profound knowledge. I think if you read the New Economics, it says what it's saying right here. The system of profound knowledge is composed of four parts, all related to each other. Appreciation for a system, knowledge about variation, theory of knowledge, and psychology. Now, two things become obvious. Number one, this is all about transformation. If someone talks to me about Deming and they don't tell me how it goes towards transformation, are they really talking about Deming? I really wonder because I think Deming himself would say, what's the point of talking about this if it isn't going to lead to transformation? Number two, how would you use this system of profound knowledge explicitly? By what method? That's really what I'm talking about here. So Deming said it would be better if everyone would work together as a system with the aim for everybody to win. Awesome. But this is implicit. By what method? That's what I'm talking about here. Management's job is thus clear: to achieve best results for everybody. Everybody wins. When I talk about equity, this is what I'm talking about. Everybody wins. This is a high bar. It's amazing when people talk about a situation and I say, well, how does everybody win in that case? How does management win? How does the employee win? How does the customer win? And I get this look like, oh, come on, John. That's theoretical. By what method? Implicit. This is what we need to be trying to do, is make this explicit. So this is a system of profound knowledge. My goal is to make each one of those circles 3D. Everybody right now is satisfied to talk about this implicitly. Did we cover psychology? Yeah, we covered psychology. That's kind of implicit. If you look at the title to this talk, rethinking efficiency and exploring effectiveness to more equity is the third dimension. I'm actually talking about the first two dimensions. And what I mean by that is efficiency. Remember, this was the theme of this year's In2. Efficiency is doing things right, focusing on optimizing processes, minimizing waste, improving resource utilization. This is the acceptable. People talk about, is it acceptable? Is it within limits? This is the one-dimensional approach. Did you address psychology? Yes, we addressed it. I call that a hurdle. It's either a yes or no. Did we clear the hurdle? Yes, we did. If we didn't clear the hurdle, no, we didn't. It wasn't acceptable. I believe the Deming community is stuck right here. Effectiveness is doing the right things, ensuring that actions contribute to achieving the desired outcomes and overall system goals. Desirable. This is really the second dimension. And there is a person who's already talking about this. And his name is Bill Bellows. Bill talks about desirable, and it upsets people. Sorting is an example of desirable. When you combine these two, one of my favorite stories that I tell other people that Bill tells is you go to NASA and you say, hey, if you're taking parts and you graded all the parts you receive from your suppliers from A to F, what's your minimum requirement for receiving a part from your suppliers? Well, today. You take them acceptable or not acceptable. Now, if you take that down to the second dimension, really you're taking a D minus, because D minus pass. This is upsetting, but this is what's happening. This is a driver. A hurdle, yes or no, a driver is how close are we getting, and the more we put effort into, the closer we get, we're getting the effect back. So there's already somebody who's been taking the step towards the second dimension. I'm talking about this third dimension. The quality of being fair and impartial. Everyone transforms. The management transforms, the employees transforms, the customer transforms. That's what Deming's talking about. If you read the New Economics, this is what he's really talking about. I call this generativity. Everybody's gaining. But really what's underneath this, and this is my main point, if this is explicit, it should be measurable. There should be a scale. You should be able to measure people on the scale. You should be able to intentionally move people up the scale. So one of the other conclusions AI made was that ultimately Deming's 3 books would be about thinking. It's all about thinking. That's what everything he's talking about is. It's thinking. What is this person thinking? Why are they thinking that? And realize everyone does everything through a thought process. If you don't understand thought processes, then you cannot be explicit. And that's one of the keys here. And in the and I said this in my interview thing, in the Deming Next, when they interviewed all these people, there were 10 people who said, if I had to summarize Deming's philosophy, it's all about thinking. So we all know that. But the goal is how do we make this system of profound knowledge explicit? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to begin by taking one of these circles. And the key here is this: you cannot make psychology explicit, but you can make psychology explicit where it overlaps another circle. That is the key to driving this. So Deming says the various segments of the system of profound knowledge proposed here cannot be separated. They interact with each other. Thus, knowledge of psychology is incomplete without knowledge of variation. A manager of people needs to understand that all people are different. What did Deming just say? He said psychology and variation overlap with uniqueness. How do you explicitly account for the uniqueness of an individual? Do you know how to explicitly determine the uniqueness of an individual? The thing is that, people kind of after the fact, the one dimensional, well, he's very much an optimist or something. It's like, okay, that's kind of that one dimensional. And the thing is that with the three-dimensional, we could measure the uniqueness of the individual. A two-dimensional one would be, if you are a little nicer to him, he'll do this. That's great. But it's the uniqueness of an individual. If your answer to how to approach somebody could be applied to Ted and Frank, you're really talking about humanoids. You're not talking about individuals. You have a strategy of how to apply to people. And Deming was talking about individuals. That's the thing we got to keep remembering. Now, I have hundreds of examples of this. I could sit here and tell examples all day long. And they go from the C-suite all over the place. But I'm going to give you, as an engineer, I'm going to give you the two most extreme examples to illustrate how, if you're not explicit, you're just not getting it done. So here's the two examples of the situation. I'm sitting in a room with the director of special education at an elementary school and one of the helpers, assistants. They get radioed. There is an elementary school girl who is destroying a classroom. She was upset. They talked to her nicely, and she responded by destroying the classroom. We walk over there, all three of us, and I stand outside the room and let those two go in. Because what I'm going to share with you today is what I shared with them, and they wouldn't do it. So I decided, you know what? I'm not helping them till they ask me for help. So I stood outside the door and let them deal with it. After 15 minutes, they came out and said, could you help us? Now, they had gotten this girl to the point where she's laying on her back underneath the table. She's not destroying anything. The teacher's at the chalkboard, 23 students on a rug in front of her. She's teaching, and behind those kids are two rows of desks, and the little girl is underneath one of those desks. How do you get her out of the room without starting her up again? Second issue, there's a kid, again, another elementary school kid. In the first 3 months of school, he had 88 seclusions and restraints. Now, a seclusion is when you have to put the kid in a room and close the door. A restraint is when you have to physically touch the kid. When you physically touch a kid in school, it's called a seclusion, and you have to write that down. We did a seclusion today. 88 in 3 months is averaging more than one a day. How do you deal with that? What's the cause of that? So really, when you think about it, if you need to know what, why, and how something works in order to do this. Implicit is looking at effects. Explicit would look at the causes. Now, how do I know this? Well, I did a PDSA for the brain. I know we have a lot of PDSA experts around. I just happen to do one for the brain. And so this is my research story. And there'll be a link in the YouTube that'll give all the specifics about this. But I got to tell you, when I gave this talk, there were 10 people in the room, and I said, hey, how many of you people do the Wordle? And 5 people raised their hand. And I said, is everybody okay if I talk about what the wordle is today? I'm not ruining anything. They said, go ahead. I said, I felt this talk is destined this morning when the wordle on this day was Glade, Glade. So I have come up with a model for the mind and brain. It's based on research that's almost 30 years old, and it all begins with this concept of adaptation and habituation. Adaptation is 21 minutes. When you walk into a room, after 21 minutes, you can no longer smell that room. Habituation is 21 days. After walking into your house 21 days in a row, you can no longer smell your house. Now, I was working on Glade plugins. It's an air freshener that goes in the wall. It works 45 days, and people said after 21 days it didn't work. So now I had to come up with a model to explain what's really going on and why can't these people smell this? So are you guys ready to be explicit about thinking? We're going to do a little PDSA on thinking. And again, like I said, there's the research link. So if you have a fragrance, so reality is the fragrance strength. The left part of this curve, the y-axis is fragrance strength. The x-axis is days. So if you have a fragrance that's a certain strength, let's call it 100 strength. When you walk into that room on day 1, you will think it smells at 60%. You'll think it's 100%, but your actual rating is 60% because the fragrance is complicated and your brain has to learn the fragrance. And because it's learning the fragrance, it doesn't get the full effect of the concentration. The second day you walk into the room, you learn the fragrance a little more, and the fragrance appears to have gotten stronger. Now, second day you walk in the room, it's the exact same strength, but you think this fragrance is getting stronger. And this happens the third day, and it happens the fourth day, and it happens the fifth day. At the fifth day, you are fully experiencing reality, but you think the fragrance has gotten stronger all 4 days in a row. This is what we call the learning phase. Once your brain has learned that, every day after that, it intentionally lessens your experience of the fragrance for 16 more days until it gets to day 21 and you can no longer smell the fragrance. And then after that, you cannot smell the fragrance. So here's the question. And this is how everybody's brain works. Look at this graph closely. There's a learning phase to the left. That point is when you're fully conscious and know something. The slope going down is when you're kind of being habitual. And then the slope where there's nothing is you have no effect. Your brain treats romantic love, your friendships, learning a hobby, all the same way. It's amazing when people talk about interacting with people, especially on Deming podcasts, and they have no clue of where the person they're talking about, where their brain is on this. They're just randomly somewhere on this. So here's the question though. How many days does the person experience reality? Well, and the answer is 1 day. No matter how hard you try, go home today and smell your house. And when you can't smell your house, you didn't try hard enough. How'd you like me? Here's a red bead experiment. Well, you didn't try hard enough to smell your house. I don't care how hard you try. Your brain is blocking it. This is how your brain actually works. Do we understand how our brain actually works? No matter how hard we try, there's only 1 day that we are smelling this. Okay. Again, are we accounting for this? Because the thing is that your unconscious brain is 90% of your brain. Your conscious brain is only 10%. So the thing is that your unconscious is actively working against you to continually smell this smell. Now, it's interesting is if you survey these people and say, how happy are you with this fragrance? Day 1, they're absolutely maxed out happiness. Day 2, absolutely maxed out happy. Day 3, day 4, day 5, maxed out happy. Day 6, they're a little less happy. Day 7, at best, they're a little less happy, but sometimes end up being really unhappy. Day 8, everybody's unhappy. Everybody can see their life is going right down the toilet, and they are not happy at all. Now, As an engineer, and I look at this graph dealing with our brain, what's the only conclusion I can come to about our brain and the purpose of our brain? Our brains are not designed to fully experience reality. Your brain actively works against you fully experiencing reality. Our brains are made for happiness. So if you think getting more facts and more understanding and being smarter is going to lead to happiness, you believe in your 10% conscious brain and you're going to lose to your 90% unconscious brain. But let me illustrate this with a story. And this is a very famous psychological experiment. It's mentioned in the book Blink. There were 4 decks of cards. 2 decks had a red back, 2 decks had a blue back. The people could pick any deck, flip a card, and they won or lost the money that was on that card. Now, what they didn't know was the red decks had big losers and big winners and more losers than winners. It was dangerous. The blue deck had little winners, little losers, and more winners than losers. It was safe. After 10 flips, everybody's unconscious brain, the 90% of their brain, knew the red deck was dangerous. After 40 flips, everybody's behavior began to change. They still picked the red deck, but not as much. After 80 flips, everybody said, the red deck is dangerous, said it consciously. Right there, I just told you everything you will ever need to know about your behavior and the behavior of everybody else. When my behavior changed at 40 flips, I don't see it, but you see it. Everybody else in the world sees it. I have a blind spot from 40 to 80. So when you come up to me and go, hey, John, your behavior's changed, I'm like, I don't see it. What I'm really saying is this. Hey, leave me alone and let me do this 40 more times till I see it. And then let me complain how hard it is to break this habit because I've ingrained it 40 more times. I love asking people, do you want to be judged by your intentions or your behavior? If you say your behavior, you're lying. If you truly want to be judged by your behavior, then when you accidentally say something racist, you have to say, I am a racist. You can't say, well, I meant intention. You don't want to be judged by intention. You want to be judged by behavior. Here's the issue in the world. Everybody in the world wants the benefit of the doubt between their intentions and their behavior. And everybody wants to deny everybody else the difference between their intentions and their behavior, their 40 flip gap. That's what's really going on in the world. And that's what we got to try to understand here. So when you think about it with the card flips, 10 flips is this 10 thought process, okay? 80 flips is where you become conscious. That's a thought process. I call it 160 when you're having this habitual situation, when you get past the 80 flips and you're used to it and you can't break that habit. That's 160. And then 320 is what we call is when you trigger. So psychology has a name for when you trigger. It's called dysregulation, fight, flight, freeze. Psychology has a name for this 160, this habitual and addictive process. They call it regulation. Psychology has a name for when you're focused. They call it self-regulation. Psychology doesn't have a name for this 10 thought process. But here's the thing. Where does innovation occur? I hear people talk about this so much. Innovation occurs in the 10 thought process. That's literally what the 10 thought process is. It's not intuition, it's innovation. So we've all heard of the Hawthorne effect. Deming worked at the Hawthorne company. The Hawthorne effect is that red guy on that mountain. He's on this 160 doing his job in the plant habitually, and then they change the light. Boom, brings him to 80. And then he slides back down that mountain. Boom, change the light, brings him to 80. Do people realize that when they talk about the Hawthorne effect? Do they know what's happening actually with thought process, not getting over to innovation? Wouldn't it be great to get on the other side of that 80? Kind of interesting. I like to ask people this question. And for people watching this on the video, you can pause after I ask this question and answer it. I'd take out a little sheet of paper. You're not going to share this with anybody. You're not going to share it with me. But here's my question. What is the one thing, if you had a magic wand, wish for one thing for yourself? This is for yourself. What's the one thing you think you need to have or do in order to be happy? So the thing is adaptation. I can be in any of these thought processes at any one time. The Hawthorne effect shows that. These people on the planet at 160, we change an effect, we bring them to 80, and they're focused. But habituation, everybody's brain is wired to one of these thought processes to be happy. So if your answer was, I want my enemy to die or get hurt, I want my competition to go out of business, your brain is wired to the dysregulation thought process for happiness. If your answer is, hey, I want to win the lottery, I want to retire, I want to sit under a cabana drinking Mai Tais, no tension at all, your brain is wired to regulation for happiness. If your answer is, hey, I want to win an award, get a degree, get a promotion, finish a project, your brain is wired to achievement or 80. Now, here's the thing. All three of those are external. Your brain habituates to everything external. Every plan for happiness that is 80, 10, 80, 160, or 320 is going to fail ultimately. It's going to destroy you. You're going to think you're getting forward, but your brain habituates to everything we've said so far. There's only one thought process for happiness that is eternal, and it's to bring out more of your uniqueness in response to what happens around you. It's an intangible thing. If you bring out your uniqueness, then you can never habituate to that. But there's that word again, uniqueness, right? Do you think Deming thought this was important? People are different from one another. A manager of people must be aware of these differences and use them for optimization of everyone's abilities and inclinations. But total submission to extrinsic motivation leads to the destruction of the individual. Extrinsic motivation, money, grades. Wait a minute. Which thought process for happiness was that? Those were achievement. Or maybe even at best, they were achievement. They could also be, the no tension thing. That is hurting people in the long term. It looks like it's helping them. It's hurting people in the long term because of habituation. And Deming said rewards motivate people to work for rewards. It changes their thought process to something less to the innovative thought process. We must restore the individual and do so in the complexities of interaction with the rest of the world. The transformation will release the power of human resource contained in intrinsic motivation. Sounds like we really need to understand intrinsic motivation. What is intrinsic motivation? It's implicit. This is implicit here. Every answer I get from people is implicit and focused on effects, freedom, pride. In fact, let me read you something people have written. The natural drive within individuals to take pride in their work and to do it well is one of the most powerful forces in human behavior. It's all implicit. Deming argued that every person is born with intrinsic motivation, curiosity, and the desire to learn and take pride in their accomplishments. In his view, the role of management should be to nurture and protect that intrinsic motivation, not destroy it through systems that rely on fear, external rewards, or arbitrary targets. By what method? The minute you think this applies and is the same to everyone, you're being implicit. Now, why did this happen? The reason this happened was due to a guy named Walter Mischel, very famous psychologist. And in personality and assessment, Mischel challenged the idea that people behave consistently across situations. He argued that behavior is shaped more by environment than a stable inner self. This rejected the concept of a consistent mind or soul behind human behavior. And Mischel's view became mainstream, shifting psychology towards situation-based behavior models. He literally said, it's too difficult for us to figure out the mind or the soul of the individual. It's much easier to look at behavior in context. This shift helped launch the personality testing industry. but may have contributed to today's mental health crisis. So this is when personality tests took over. Now, Hippocrates, every personality test is based on the four temperaments. And Hippocrates invented that over 2,000 years ago. And what Hippocrates himself said was, whenever I see one of these four behaviors coming out of a person, I know they are unbalanced. They have too much blood or too little blood, bile, black bile, or phlegm. So a personality implies you're unbalanced. Second of all, personality comes from the Latin word persona, which means mask. So when people talk about their personality, they're saying, hey, everybody, here's the mask I hide behind when I'm feeling unbalanced. A personality test is really, if you remember that 160 slope, that regulation, when people, here's the value of personality test. And people are in regulation, habitual, and they're about to trigger, you give them what they need according to their personality test to stop them from hurting themselves or other people. This does not result in the power and the energy and the joy in the individual. We are just avoiding a catastrophe. And the reality is studies have shown that 50% of people change their personality after 6 months. We're looking for something that's more permanent than that. One of Deming's more famous quotes, the prevailing system of management has destroyed our people. I'd say the lack of intrinsic motivation is destroying people. Deming knew a focus on anything other than the uniqueness of the individual was destroying them because of habituation. So anything less than an explicit intrinsic motivation approach is going to be damaging. The most important act that a manager can take is to understand what it is that is important to an individual, not a humanoid, not people in general, an individual. Otherwise, it's implicit. Everyone is different from everyone else. All people are motivated to a different degree, extrinsically and intrinsically. It's all about thinking and specific down to the individual. Okay. So Mike Beck gave the talk last month. I think he helped me shave 10 minutes off this talk because one of the three things I learned from his talk was explicit and implicit. And I realized that really cuts to the core of all this, is that we need to be explicit. Now, your brain is 90% unconscious. That's where all your energy is. That's where your behavior is. So in reality, the way you change behavior is unconsciously. It's not conscious. When you unconsciously confront somebody, and I'll talk a little bit about this here in a minute, it ends up changing their behavior long term. And but if you sit there and be logical and try this, it's never going to work that way. So what we need to do is reach that person that way. Now, this is the quote that I got from Edward Baker, Director of Quality Strategy Forward. This was in the documentary, The Deming of America, Priscilla Petty's 1991 documentary. Deming was still alive. And Edward Baker says, we've become very good at applying his principles on the shop floor, and we've made a lot of progress in this decade. But Dr. Deming likes to say that's really 3% of where we can go. That 3% is the red bead presentation. It's the specific we're measuring apart. Deming meant for this to apply to everything. Okay. So you think about it. Bill talks red pen, blue pen. That's Bill's version of going, this goes more than just the cap and the pen. It goes to the whole company. We should have a red bead application for everything in a company. How to talk to the C-suite, everything, how everything is done. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you like a part of a chapter in this third book. The approach I use is this. I call it the intangible drivers. Now, this is not a personality test. We have used this with preteen and teenager emotional behavioral disorder students with diagnosed mental issues, as well as C-suite people and executives. What I'm showing you here, I've used with everybody, every walk of life. Okay. It's just that the preteen, no one has an employee or a boss that is worse than a preteen or a teenage emotional behavioral disorder student with diagnosed mental issues. You don't. So you can't show me a case that's worse than what I've been sharing with you here. So the key though, hey, that worked that way. The key is for the teacher to know their uniqueness as well as the student to know their uniqueness. Because Deming spoke about education. He said it should be a system that recognizes difference between pupils and differences between teachers. It's amazing how many people I hear talking about education and they never account for, well, you're talking to this teacher. Why are you talking to them the same as that teacher? Aren't the teachers individuals or are they humanoids? Do they have a different way of approaching things? And then the students have a different way of approaching things? So I can tell you that before you think that what I'm showing you is too complicated, we have elementary school students who understand this, take this information home, and transform their families. And in the body of the YouTube post, there will be links to some videos that explain that, some testimonials. So this is not, unless you can't keep up with an elementary school student, this is not that complicated. So the thing is that my model, my overarching model for this is that you are a driver in a car. Okay. So you are this intangible driver in the car, and that's your mind or soul. The car is your brain. Now, just like you are only in direct control of 10% of the car, gas pedal, steering wheel, brake, you are only in direct control of 10% of your brain, the conscious brain. 90% of that car is where all the behavior and energy is. 90% of your brain is where all your behavior and energy is. So who is driving your brain, your car? That's the intangible driver. That's why we named it like that. So I walk up, this little girl is underneath this table, and I know she's administrator exhorter. Administrators like to be in a group, they hate being left out. Exhorters love to have fun. So I whisper a sentence to her. She slowly rolls over on all fours. She starts crawling towards the student. Teacher gets a little scared, gets out from under the desk, stands up behind the students, and then sleepwalk behind the students out the door. Never touched her. Teacher's like, what did you say to her? All I said to her was, we're going to room 52 and it's going to be fun. I will tell you, this same approach is what I use to help executives deal with bullying from C-suite people. C-suite people love to bully. And when executives learn this technique and I explain it to them and they write an email, it's amazing. The C-suite person bullies everybody but the executive who wrote the email and never bullies them again. Do we really understand how the brain works? Do we really understand who's driving the brain? This kid's got 88 seclusions and restraints. We find out he's administrator perceiver. We move him to a teacher who has this training, and the other teacher had all that typical training. The teacher starts talking to the kid as administrator perceiver, and over the final 6 months of school, he has zero, Z-E-R-O, seclusions and restraints. So what was the cause of him averaging more than one seclusion and restraint per day? Well, it's the system. It's the training the teacher gets and the reinforcement. In fact, a larger school district threatened the school district where this happened because they didn't want them to have their name on sharing this information, because they would rather the teachers abuse the kids than actually say, hey, we need to fix things and not abuse them. Because you see, if you're not talking to the intrinsic motivation, the intangible driver of a person, you're draining their energy and you're hurting them long term, because the prevailing system of management has destroyed our people and they don't even realize the damage they're actually doing. If you aren't talking to their intrinsic motivation, then you're taking them down. My quote is, the lack of explicit intrinsic motivation is destroying the people. That's what Deming, I believe, is saying. If you really don't understand this, then you think you're getting ahead in the moment, but I believe long term, you're not doing that. So, self-esteem is confidence in your uniqueness. If you understand your uniqueness and you grow in it, that would take care of merit pay. That would take care of all the stuff. I've been in charge of an organization where we did all this. I've been in charge of a transformed organization. And I can tell you this how it works. I have another transform organization that's going through this right now, and they do that as well. But if you don't think Deming said any of this, please give me your address and your name. Because when I go down to the courthouse and say, this is all my idea, Deming never thought of this, I'm going to point to you. So let me know if you want to be used that way. So the area that is really handled implicitly and is doing the most damage is this joy at work. Anyone that enjoys his work is a pleasure to work with. In his best-selling book, Flow by Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, he wrote on page 201, what we need is not only names and descriptions, but an understanding of how the process works. Unfortunately, our ignorance in this matter is still very great. He basically said, I don't know how to intentionally help people flow. He wrote an implicit book. He wrote the effects of flow. And the effects of flow is all this joy and satisfaction and engagement and all this wonderful, great stuff. But this was his explanation why I can't tell you how to do it. I have the model for how to do this. I help people find their unique process for flow, their Flowcess. That's the name of the company that I work for. That's what we do. Now, why are we able to understand flow? Well, there's three reasons. So here's the four thought process put more in a fractal form. If you see it, basically you have this innovative thought process here. You have the focused conscious thought process here, the addictive unconscious thought process here, and the fight flight here. Now, the first thing to realize is flow is not a thought process. So if anybody ever says flow is a thought process, they don't know what they're talking about. Flow is the toggling between these two thought processes. How would you stand on hot sand barefooted? You'd rock back and forth. When you flow, you're rocking with your brain and your brain never gets tired. So that's the key to flow, is to do that. Now, one of the links is the Harvard Business Review 7 or 8 years ago had an article about toggling or flow. And the article was saying basically too much focus, too much thinking logically at 80 results in people losing energy and then losing self-control. They literally explain 80, 160, 320. The killer in that article is the third thing that AI said Deming needed to get explicit about, and that's leadership. That article says flow is the essence of leadership. I love people trying to explain leadership. It's so contradictory when they try to explain it. I can just point up a couple examples, but there is an explanation of leadership that fits right in with everything Deming was saying. He just wasn't explicit. And there's some quotes that you could see actually what he's saying is the effects of it, and he got it right. But that would be one of the things he'd have to get right. And it involves flow. Number two, well, if flow is the toggling between these two thought processes, you need to understand this innovative thought process, right? Psychology doesn't even have a name for it. So good luck with that. We understand that 10 thought process. Third, if flow is manipulating your brain between two thought processes, what's doing the manipulation? Can't be your brain. Has to be something before your brain. Your intangible driver. If you are going to help people intentionally flow and you cannot help them figure out their intangible uniqueness, their intrinsic motivation, you don't stand a chance of helping them achieve this. Now, here's the thing. In the comments, I have this Lolo link talking about the culture, and that link's like 7, 8 years old, and it's really interesting because he says every organization has these 5 cultures in a sense. And here's the thing. The second area to make these 4 circles explicit is thought processes. Actually, we're knowledge of a system and knowledge overlap is thought process. So I'm giving you 2 for 1 in this talk here. So there's 4 thought processes, and then there's flow. So this is the lowest thought process, second lowest, third lowest, second highest, and then flow is the highest. Lelou does these 5 circles, and they correspond to 320, 160, 80, 10, and then flow. So the thing is Deming said the first step is transformation of the individual. So what does that look like? Well, if you go in an organization and you say to the employee, "Hey, let's do a good job this week," he goes, "It doesn't matter what I do. It doesn't matter what I do. Company does fine. I don't have to do anything." That's the lowest level thought process. I can measure that and go, "You see that right there? It's the lowest level." Somebody goes, "Oh, I'm the cause. I'm the reason the team's doing well. It's all me. It's all me." Second level. The system is the cause. This is the red beads. What was Deming doing? He was taking organizations from that second to that third. That's what he was doing. He was progressing. The road to transformation is going from that second to the third and moving your way up. The red beads cause you to see that. In the Lelou circles, the overarching model for this third level is the machine. Bill gave me this great presentation from Akoff where he talked about the machine age. And then he talked about how the machine age was replaced by another age and another age. Guess what? Same emblems used for the next 2, believe it or not. Now, again, we're trying for transformation, right? That's the organism. And Akoff said the same thing. Lelou said the same thing. People asked Deming, "Hey, did you ever transform a company? Did you ever get them from that third to that fifth step?" Now, they didn't know they were saying third to fifth step, but I think you already know why his answer was no, he never did it. Because he couldn't go from the third to the fifth step. You cannot go from the third to the fifth step. You can't do it. You got to go the fourth step. Well, what's the fourth step? It's this desirable versus acceptable. It's this hurdles and drivers. Guess who's our pre-transformational prophet? It's Bill Bellows. What Bill has been doing is trying to show people how to achieve the fourth level. And the best example of this is it's not just desirable. Bill will sit there and say, "Okay, so you want zero defects, zero defects. And if it costs your company $5 billion, you'll get zero defects, right?" Well, no, that would bankrupt us. Then why did you go zero defects? Like, there's certain things in your company that are a hurdle, that it's okay to be acceptable. There's certain things that are a driver. You need to be desirable. Do you know the difference between the two? That's literally what Bill's been trying to do. When I met Bill and got to know him, I sat there and went, "Oh my goodness, this guy is the fourth level. He's a second dimension. I don't know that anybody sees this." And I think this might be the only guy in the world who's going to appreciate someone who could show the fifth level in 3 dimensions. But that's what we've been dealing with. So, Bill, you have the story about Akoff, and you think about it. Everything about Deming was transformation is an individual thing. And I have this written out as like this individual, but these correspond to the thought processes too. So when Akoff looked at something, he could say, well, the highest level of transformation would be the ultimate answer or the innovation. So do you want to tell a story real quick about when you asked Akoff about this question?
Yeah, what I was sharing with John or have shared is I think most of you know for 17 years every month when I was at Rocketdyne, I hosted what was known as the ongoing discussion where someone I'd come across I thought was doing something fascinating, and they would provide an article that I called a thought piece, and they'd be the thought leader. And the end of the month on Thursday and Friday, there'd be 4 different options for a 1-hour call. It wasn't a presentation, it was a conversation, and people would call in and they'd say, "Deb and Doug, on page 5, can you explain?" And because Deb and Doug were thought leaders several times. And then for about 4 years, Russ was the January thought leader. Um, Russ was the very first one to be a repeat every month, every January. So the very last ongoing discussion with Russ, and I'd want to be in his office because when it was an opportunity to go spend personal time with him too, is I didn't want the call to be interrupted because he wasn't hearing, and so I wanted to be in the room with him. And so the last time I was with him, he had just turned 90. I'm in his office at his home, sitting on the opposite sides of a very small table. So we were very close together. And in the somewhere in those 4 1-hour calls, the term transformation came up. So when the last call ended, I looked at Russ. We were done, and I said, it just dawned on me, and I didn't want it just, and it had dawned on me before, but now it came up on the call. This term transformation. I said, Russ, you and Deming, you and Dr. Deming both used the term transformation. He means it as a personal transformation. And I said, you use it as the property of a solution. And I just never thought to ask you about that. And he looks at me, we're face to face, and he says, I see no value in that conversation. Let's go have lunch. And I shared that with Shel Rovin several hours later. Many of you got a chance to meet Shel. And Shel, for those who don't know, was a professor at Penn, as Russ was. He was prior dean of the School of Dentistry, University of Kentucky, and the University of Washington. No slouch. And I called up Shel that night, and I said, this is what happened with Russ. And he said, he really said that. I said, not only did he say it, I said, but I wasn't surprised when he said that. Go ahead, John.
Yeah, thank you. And so I could see, that's exactly it. Deming was this individual, and Akoff was more bigger picture, and he was looking at the whole system, and it was kind of a measure of what had been achieved. So transformation is hierarchical. There's steps. You can't skip the steps. These things need to be done. And I will tell you this, that I asked ChatGPT the best transformation books ever written. It gave me 11 books. I said, what's the key to transformation in each book? 7 of those books is the intrinsic motivation, your authenticity, being your real self, understanding who you really are all the time. So 7 of those 11 talk about that. 3 of the books is the thought process that we just talked about, the thought process you habituate to. And so it's where's your thought process at? One of them was about having this epiphany, this truth, a universal truth. None of them covered the 4th, which I'm not going to mention here, but I implied it in this talk several times. So I will tell you this. None of the best 11 books on transformation covers more than one of the 4 areas that are needed. None of them together covered all 4 of them. And I believe Deming's 3rd book would be the greatest book on transformation because it literally would cover all 4 in a very measurable way. So it's kind of interesting here with this quote, the shop floor is, there was an issue with the New Economics Book Club, session 6. And Bill pointed everybody to the first cohort. I was on that. If you go to the last 45 minutes, you're going to hear a really great discussion about this quote in a sense, but we didn't mention this quote. And somebody says, look, he was talking about how the Hudson Bay Company had hundreds of years been around and all of a sudden was no longer around. And the management, what did they do wrong? And the comment was, well, they didn't look down the road. And his point was, well, but some people would say they had no idea about the shop floor. So this term shop floor is the product that goes out the door that we can measure, the tangible thing. That's it. And he even says in that discussion, how do we get Deming's information to apply to the whole company, not just the shop floor? So that actually literally was in the discussion that Bill kind of pointed everybody back to. So if you think about it, again, Bill's the red pen, blue pen is his way of starting this discussion about the whole company. I'm willing to teach this information. And so in the links, it'll show you like instant impacts are course, but I'm willing to teach this within In2, inside of In2 for free, because I'd like to help people understand this so that they can become the experts in their areas. Because if you think about this, what Deming is saying right here is that there are 32 markets the size of the current Deming consulting market. The current Deming consulting market for quality and leadership is $8 billion a year. Okay. In the low, when they do that fourth level, they mention agile and lean. Agile and lean is $40 to $50 billion a year. I have said many times to Bill, if the third book came out, there would be no need for agile and lean. The reason why Deming's behind agile and lean is that third book hasn't come out. In the low, they say, because they talk about the fifth level, and when you look at the description, it's everything Deming's talking about. And he says, if companies would achieve the fifth level, agile and lean would be too constricting and they would go away. $250 billion opportunity here. The global market for quality and leadership is $1.2 trillion. But this 97%, we could be inhabiting all of that. And Bill and I aren't able to be experts in 32 fields. So I know somebody in In2 who told me, I want to be the expert at helping people deal with conflict through communication. I'm like, that's exactly what I do. I use this. I would love to teach you this stuff. You go be the expert, be the world's expert at that. Because that's what we got here at In2. We have all these people who have all this opportunity. So I would love to take questions on the YouTube because I'd love other people to do that. But I just want to say thank you, everybody, for sticking with me through this. And this is stuff I'm really, really excited about.
Michael, yeah, it looks like you got a question.
John, I just want to thank you. I had a chance to see the presentation in California, and I was going to say, I hope you've honed it a little bit, and it wouldn't have mattered because it blows me away every time. Both times now that I've seen this. The one thing I would say is I've spent a lot of time on the shop floor. That's where the numbers are. So when you talk about transforming the individual, I find that you're going to hit the majority of the people on the shop floor, in the departments,